This video is for all the neurodiverse couples out there that are struggling pretty much on a daily basis. What if the relationship behavior that looks cold, selfish, dismissive, even emotionally abusive, isn't actually driven by malice at all? What if some of the most painful relationship conflicts happening behind closed doors are actually collisions between two nervous systems that interpret reality completely differently? So today, we're going to analyze real anonymous Reddit-style relationship dilemmas through a neurodiverse lens. Not to excuse harmful behavior, and certainly not to invalidate your pain as the NT spouse, but to uncover what's actually happening underneath the conflict. Because when people misunderstand neurological patterns as intentional neglect, relationships spiral into shame, defensiveness, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. And many couples never realize they're fighting the wrong enemy the entire time. So today, we're going to slow these conflicts down clinically. We're going to decode executive dysfunction, sensory overload, literal processing, autistic burnout, shutdown responses, emotional flooding, and nervous system misfires hiding inside everyday relationship fights. And if you're in a neurodiverse relationship, there's a good chance you're going to recognize yourself somewhere in these stories. Here's the first real-life story. He never helps unless I ask. The NT wife states the following. My husband is smart and successful at work, but at home I feel invisible. I handle the kids' meals, planning, cleaning, appointments, birthdays, everything. He says he wants to help, but unless I explicitly ask him to do something, he just doesn't notice. Then when I get upset, he says he didn't know I needed help. I'm starting to feel emotionally abandoned. Okay, let's pause right here. Because most internet relationship advice immediately frames this as weaponized incompetence. He knows. He just doesn't care. If he wanted to, he would. Okay, hold it. Clinically, neurodiverse couples often experience something very different. When the neurotypical partner experiences emotional invisibility, chronic loneliness, cognitive overload, resentment for carrying the mental load, what the autistic partner is experiencing is task blindness, initiation paralysis, executive dysfunction, contextual processing difficulties, attentional tunnel vision. And this distinction matters enormously because intent changes intervention. A neurotypical brain often tracks relational systems automatically. The dishes in the sink are not just dishes. They represent shared responsibility, emotional attunement, partnership awareness, anticipation of needs. But many autistic people process tasks more literally and sequentially, which means if I was not assigned the task, my brain may not automatically register it as actionable. That doesn't mean your ASD spouse doesn't care. It means that his brain struggles with spontaneous prioritization and invisible labor tracking. Now here's the tragic part. The neurotypical spouse often interprets this as, well, you saw me drowning and you just chose not to help. While the autistic partner experiences, I genuinely didn't realize the urgency until you became upset. Two completely different realities, same marriage. Now let's look at a de-escalation framework. The goal here is not who's right. The goal is how do we reduce nervous system threat so collaboration becomes possible? Instead of, well, you never help me, try, my nervous system experiences overwhelm when household responsibilities remain unspoken. I need visible systems rather than implied awareness. That language changes everything. Why? Because shame shuts down executive functioning. And when you get upset with your ASD spouse, your intent is not to shame, but the impact is shame. Many autistic partners already feel like they're constantly failing invisible tests they don't fully understand. And once shame enters the room, defensive withdrawal follows. Then the neurotypical partner feels even more abandoned, and now the toxic cycle begins again. Let's move on to the next story. He shuts down during conflict. The NT wife says, and I quote, every time we argue, my ASD partner goes silent. He stares at the floor, says nothing, leaves the room. I feel emotionally discarded. It feels manipulative because I'm left alone carrying all the emotional weight again. Okay. Now, this is one of the most misunderstood neurodiverse dynamics online because ASD silence is often interpreted by the NT spouse as punishment, withholding, emotional cruelty, passive aggression. But neurologically, shutdowns are nervous system collapse, not power plays. Now let's look at what may actually be happening. During emotionally intense conversations, Most autistic nervous systems experience cognitive flooding. The brain essentially loses processing bandwidth. Language formulation collapses, working memory weakens, emotional integration slows, verbal access decreases, and internally, the autistic person feels panic, confusion, cognitive chaos, and desperation to escape stimulation. But externally, they look detached, cold, uncaring. And this mismatch destroys relationships because the neurotypical spouse sees indifference. He doesn't care. He's insensitive, selfish, narcissistic. While the autistic spouse may internally feel total nervous system overload, coupled with shame. Now, let me be very clear about something here. A shutdown is not a free pass to abandon your NT partner emotionally. Understanding neurological mechanisms does not eliminate relational accountability, but accountability becomes much more effective when we accurately identify the mechanism. Because if you interpret neurological overload as malicious intent, insensitivity, narcissism, sociopathy, and so on, your interventions become punitive instead of regulating. Did you hear me? I said your interventions become punitive instead of regulating, and punishment increases shutdown frequency, and you're living it. So here's the reframe. Instead of, well, you don't care enough to talk to me, try, I think your nervous system may be overloaded right now, but I still need reassurance that we'll return to this conversation. That approach preserves emotional safety, accountability, nervous system regulation, relational trust at the same time. Now here's the next real-life story. He thinks I'm criticizing him. The NT wife says, and I quote, I tried giving feedback about household finances, and my ASD husband completely melted down emotionally. I wasn't yelling, I was calm, but somehow every conversation turns into him feeling attacked. Does that sound familiar? Now, this one gets fascinating clinically, because many autistic people carry years, sometimes decades, of accumulated corrective trauma. Accumulated corrective trauma. Especially autistic adults diagnosed later in life. Many grew up hearing, you're too sensitive. Why can't you just do normal things? You're lazy, you're selfish. You never think about anyone else. And over time, the nervous system becomes hypervigilant toward perceived criticism. Even neutral feedback can trigger threat activation, especially if the person already feels inadequate, or he struggles with performance consistency, or he experiences repeated relational failure, or he lives in chronic burnout. So now a simple budgeting conversation feels neurologically unsafe. Now, this is where couples get stuck. One partner says, I'm just communicating. The other experiences, I'm failing again. One nervous system hears information, the other hears danger. And unless couples learn to recognize this dynamic, they keep re-traumatizing each other accidentally. And how much longer are you going to allow that to go on? Let's look at a practical framework here. Before difficult conversations, try to reduce sensory stimulation, avoid rapid-fire emotional intensity, lower accusatory language, separate behavior from identity, and create structured conversation boundaries. For example, instead of, you never manage money responsibly, try, I want us to create systems that reduce stress for the both of us. That feels collaborative instead of identity threatening. And collaboration reduces defensive nervous system activation. Now, let's look at a question here. Why does everything feel so personal? Okay, well, one of the biggest tragedies in neurodiverse relationships is that both people often feel chronically unseen. The neurotypical spouse feels emotionally neglected, alone, invalidated, exhausted. And the autistic spouse feels constantly criticized, perpetually failing, misunderstood, unsafe, and ashamed. And both people become trapped inside intent narratives. She's attacking me. He's abandoned me. She's controlling. He's selfish. Meanwhile, underneath the surface, two overwhelmed nervous systems are misreading each other continuously. Now, here's where the internet often goes wrong. One reason neurodiverse couples become so hopeless is because generic relationship advice frequently pathologizes neurological systems as moral failures. So again, some people are emotionally abusive. Some people are manipulative. Some people absolutely avoid accountability. I understand that. But not every relational failure is narcissism, okay? Not every shutdown is stonewalling. Not every forgotten task is intentional neglect. Not every lack of emotional reciprocity is cruelty. Sometimes it's executive dysfunction, sensory overload, cognitive rigidity, emotional processing differences, nervous system dysregulation, autistic burnout, attentional fragmentation. And when couples finally understand that, something remarkable happens. The shame starts decreasing. And when that happens, emotional safety slowly begins to return. Now, let's look at what actually heals these relationships. It ain't going to be blame or internal labels or demonizing each other. What's going to help is nervous system awareness, pattern recognition, explicit communication systems, reduced mind reading expectations, reduced heart reading expectations, collaborative structure, emotional translation, and compassionate accountability. That last phrase matters deeply. Compassionate accountability. Because neurodiversity explains behavior, but explanation is not exemption. The goal is not, well, this is just how my brain works. No, the goal is, how do we build systems that protect both the nervous systems? That's where healing begins. Now, if you recognize your relationship in today's video, you're not alone. And more importantly, you may not be trapped in the story you've been told about your relationship. What looks like intentional emotional destruction from the outside is sometimes two people drowning in completely different neurological realities. That doesn't erase the pain, but it changes the path forward. Because once couples stop fighting imagined intent, once they stop making up horror stories about the other person, they can finally start addressing the actual mechanism underneath the conflict. And that's where genuine repair becomes possible. Now, if this video helped you see your neurodiverse conflict differently, subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me, what relationship behavior have you completely reinterpreted after learning more about neurodiversity? Because sometimes one little shift in understanding changes everything. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.